I had never heard of Hinduphobia. The NCRI has done extensive work on all kinds of cyber threats facing vulnerable communities. And this was something that people weren't really familiar with, myself included. And I remember a student coming to me showing me a grotesque image of Hindus covered in filth with flies around them and like large nose protuberances and kind of rubbing their hands together, very similar to anti-Semitic memes that had been populated by extremist groups on both the right and the left. So as soon as I saw that, I was like, wait a minute, this is something that seems like it's growing. It has a romantic ideology. It's not just anti-immigrant hatred. There's something that's very articulated about this. And when things are that articulated and jokey and coded, people have put effort into it. So I was like, what is this? So I remember speaking to Rajiv about this. I said, Rajiv, I'd heard about Rajiv. He'd come to me through sort of through connections of ours, obviously he's published a lot of books. He's well known on the subject. So I went to visit Rajiv, and I'd heard that he's somebody who might be able to help, talk about it because there's not like a lot of topic experts on Hinduphobia in the world, right? But he happened to live close to me. So when I finally met Rajiv and I explained to him what I was seeing, he said, this is thousands of years old. It's like, oh my God. Right? Like I'd never even heard of this, and it was alive and well, had ancient colonial roots, right? Had been propagated by Muslims thousands of years ago, and by the West since, and over. So this is a very very old hatred, and it has had time to develop. So the fact that it's emerging now really means that something that has had thousands of years to emerge has met a digital domain where it can spread. And that is a really nasty combination. This is actually an ancient hatred, right? So, when I talked to Rajiv, I was like, well, why does the hatred exist? And he says, well, listen, it's like this is what is it that propels these kinds of hatred? It's when people are vacuous and don't have within themselves a sense that they have a sort of a supply chain that could go on forever, right? They feel like their lives are ephemeral, right? And empty. And so what's interesting is that's the point of the Infinity Foundation, right? That's why they're the whole idea of the Infinity Foundation, and I'd come to learn this is something that's common amongst in Hindu thinking. Turns out we can talk about our problems. Turns out that we can actually talk to one another, regard one another as whole human beings, and have deep philosophical, well-informed conversations to see things very similarly or differently, but respect those differences, right? So that idea is the idea that we have through reason and the capacity to see each other and humanize each other, a stairway towards infinite growth, right? That our ideas can die for us. We don't have to kill each other. And the more we can reason with one another, the more we can disarm the problems that face our future. And that can go on forever, right? The people who don't believe that hate the people who do. Okay, because in their minds, there's only one way for if we live in an infinite world, if we live in a world that has it's not going to last forever, we don't have a trajectory towards that, then the only thing there is making sure I'm God, making sure I'm in control. That's all that's left. It doesn't matter what you think, right? So that the hatred, the mob mentality, the authoritarian ideas, the need for conquest, right? What's fascinating about the Infinity Foundation, what's fascinating about these things that I came to learn were core to Hindu ideology and belief, is that it's not an emergency that the whole world doesn't look like us. It's not an emergency. We don't have to take it over, right? We don't have to. There's no need for us to murder each other. We can actually talk. We can have our own distinct identities, and there's a unity in that. Okay, so that idea is obviously something that has was developed in the subcontinent and what has had a life of its own and a huge impact in the East. And so I came to appreciate so much about our work through Hinduphobia, talking about these things. And of course, we talked about AI. Of course, we talked about the way this was growing online, and the use of algorithms to amplify these hatreds, and the way in which people were giving themselves over to a kind of mindlessness, right? That is actually the hallmark of these kinds of authoritarian and limiting ideas. So this is something that I've really valued Rajiv's input on. He's a visionary. He saw these things so far beyond what people have seen. He's seen all the way down into the university and the corruption of these of a worldview that objectifies subjects and strips them of their native voice, strips them of speaking as subjects, right? That's what the Academy has done to Hinduism. That's what it's done to many different topics. He was immediately suspect of this and said there's extremism that's going to come along the ride for this because that is an extremist project. That's a nihilistic project. He's right. He saw that before anybody did. And look what's happening to the universities now. Look what's happening. And all in the name of this identity politics because everyone knows how empty these authoritarian ideas are. So they end up needing to play Dungeons and Dragons with race. They end up needing to play Dungeons and Dragons with these things that have no memory, no life. You know that and people need to replace themselves with these things because they feel they have no intrinsic value. So that that he saw that decades, literally decades ago. You know, and like to encounter someone like Rajiv who has seen all of this for such a long time is a really extraordinary experience. You know, we became very fast friends. You know, I'm a neuroscientist who really loves to think deeply about these issues. In meeting someone like Rajiv, I met somebody who'd been doing this for years before I was born. So I think he's had this impact on the field by being able to see so far ahead. You know, he's been able to raise a generation of leaders in that have come under his umbrella and has within his perception the kernel of a vision for the future of Hindu life that is more active, that is more action oriented and that seats Hindus and the rest of the world with the responsibility to be hands-on about the problems they have to solve. This is crucial. It's crucial because and it's especially crucial for the Hindu community. In obtaining the positions of wealth and success that the Hindu diaspora has in recent years. Like there's no doubt that the success of the culture is reflected in that. But the need to be responsible with that success and to put hands on the wheel in the face of these encroaching problems of hatred has never been more obvious. So the Infinity Foundation and his vision was ultimately one that seats individuals with personal responsibility because the question is not going to be what it is these authoritarians are going to do. We know what they're going to do. The question is what it is we are going to do. That's the question. So what's powerful about the Infinity Foundation is that it's worth it for us to wake up and to take aim together at cynical and sinister projects and overcome them directly. We do this from a place of fortitude, and we do this from a place of having a real personage to resist that, right? And it turns out that is the trajectory towards infinite growth. What's happened with the Hindu community is that there's an illustrative success of that has come out of Hindu thinking here in the West. You can see that because Hindus are literally that they are at the top. They are the most successful immigrant community in the United States, bar none, number one. Okay, so that doesn't happen accidentally. That doesn't happen accidentally. That happens because there's emphasis on individual growth. There's emphasis on human resources and the development of human resources, how important those are. So individuals come and they endure with the success of their of the and the luck of having such a wonderful cultural heritage, and one that is so enriching, right? But the problem about diasporic life, you see, is that it's not the problem that we have to solve in diasporic life and living in a world being strangers is that it's not enough for us to raise fine children. It is not enough for us to sink and invest and grow as a family, grow as an individual. It is not sufficient. Because the problem to solve isn't the problem of how do I be a good person. The problem to solve is how we can be good people in a bad neighborhood. Okay? If so, what that means is that our focus, the focus of the project of infinite growth, which is the cultural legacy of Hinduism, right? It means that it's time to embrace that with almost like a covenantal responsibility, right? If that matters, this is how it must matter. If we mean it, if we really mean that these values are important, this is how we must mean it. Because if we don't mean it that way, it turns out it's not going to work. So I guess we don't really mean it at all. So that's the key that in this, and he sees this too. Rajiv sees that too. He perceives the need for a transformation of Hindu life, a renaissance, where the ancient traditional ideas that are embedded and that dignify human life are brought forth in ways that are robust, that are brought forth in ways that articulate that value and do not hide. They do not hide. It's only the dignity of these values that can protect us from the indignity and cynicism of the things that seek to tear them down. The extent to which we push against those and stop keeping our heads down, that is a bad instinct. It's a bad instinct to keep your heads down because you think we're going to survive whatever comes out of this. We're going to do that. It's not true. We've seen over and over again that the need to care for one another, the need to be adaptive and strong and strengthen community bonds, that is uniquely what allows these communities to adapt and survive in the face of oppressive conditions. It allows them the flexibility to be able to move when necessary, share resources, right? It's this the exhibition of mutual concern must become a predominant feature of modern Hindu life. It's not enough to succeed. It's not enough that your children do well and become mathematicians or professors or lawyers or and lead CEOs as come. It's great that that's true, but we're seeing it now. Look at what happened with the H-1B debate on Twitter. Look what happened with this, right? So I think we have to show that, like, whatever else is true, we as human beings are committed to a unified pluralism. We're committed to that. That's especially important for the communities threatened by it, by the people who don't. So we have to become exemplars. We have to become exemplars. We have to become examples of that. So there's a need to wake up. There's absolutely a need to wake up for the Hindu community and to realize that they're at a moment of crisis. They have come to be a fixation, both on the authoritarian left and the authoritarian right. I've never seen anything like it. It's the growth of a hatred that's happened very rapidly just over the past few years. And the precarity of Hindu life in this country is going to become a definitive problem for woke politics on the left and woke politics on the right. There's no doubt about it, right? And we recognize this. We as Jews obviously know how to see this. We obviously know how to see this coming because it's coming for us too, right? So there's a need for us to broker very deep and honest conversations. And if we're going to do something about this, we'd better do it right now. Part of the problem is that it takes time to develop the practice of institutional diasporic life. It takes time to do that. Because how do you get it right? How do you organize, something that is good for you and good for everybody, right? How do you do that in ways that share resources and create bonds of trust, right? There needs to be convenings of Hindus to create a congress, to create a congressional sort of movement to start, like there should be Hindu, like the JCC, like Jewish Community Center. There should be Hindu community centers everywhere. There should be Hindu philosophy community centers where everyone can come talk about their, like, why don't those exist? Right? Because it would showcase the value, and that value's there. It's not like that value isn't there. The value's there, right? So there's a need to really become more active and a need to give. There's a need to give and a need to create the practice of giving. That's hard. That's hard to do. So we need a few people to be able to take willing and daring moves to change the norms. That doesn't happen unless people shock everyone else. Oh, wow, somebody gave more this year. One individual could do it. Somebody gave more this year than all Hindus have given to all these institutions combined last year. And it wouldn't take much. Like one $20 million donation, which happens all the time, right? Happens in universities all the time, happens in Jewish institutions, right? So it needs to happen. We need to find the few people who are willing to break the mold in order to broadcast that we're changing the game. We're changing the norms. And that Rajiv needs to call on these people to do this. He should be completely unafraid of that. He should demand it. It has to happen. And I think part of the problem is that Hindus still don't realize how serious this is. They still don't understand how, like, these people who are talking about, like, how privileged Hindus are with DEI. We found that that's associated with in our own research. We found that when people take these DEI programs on caste, they end up agreeing with Hitler statements about Hindus. We take Hitler statements, take out the word Jew, put in the word Hindu. People are more likely to agree with that. That's demonization. Okay, after DEI, that's what it does. It causes this focused demonization. And the same thing's true on the right. We're seeing that now too. I 100% guarantee you, these people really mean it. I guarantee they mean it. The question is not how do I get by and who cares what happens to my neighbors. That's not even intelligently self-interested. I mean, that's not intelligent. But forget that it's unintelligent. It's the wrong perspective. Like we need to be thinking about how we can protect our communities, and we need to be thinking about how our lives can become about that, and how we can orient other people towards thinking that way, because the belief in selfishness is contagious. When we see somebody withhold their money, it makes us think, well, I guess no one really means it, so I'm going to withhold my money. I'm not going to do this, right? So that's why the next generation of that's why the part of the vision for the Infinity Camp Foundation is covenantal Hinduism. It's the idea that it isn't enough for us to sustain ourselves on a wisdom tradition that benefits us individually. We need to come together in order to contend and fight for these values in a world that's hostile to them, right? That means we need to change our orientation from from self-actualization to community activity and community growth, right? Because the self-actualization, that'll come along for the ride. If you're oriented towards the growth of your community and you're in service to your community, that's seva, that's service, right? If you're oriented towards that, don't worry about the enlightenment stuff. That'll take care of itself. They've got to wake up to seva. They've got to wake up to the importance of seva and displacing their own self-importance, right? And that has to be cut out. That's bad. That stuff is really bad. And people should be ashamed of themselves. They should be for not being involved in ways that protect their values because it shows they don't really care about their values. And that's such a sinister thing to project. And then and like, it's like there's not much we can do about the authoritarians and their commitments to being monsters. When people made that commitment, it's a very expensive thing to admit that those people really exist and to get that right? It's very expensive. But there's a lot more we can do about our own hopelessness. That's where our power lies, right? So these are parts anyone who listened to our conversation would tell you that everything we're discussing is a well-worn road in Indian philosophy. It is a very well-worn road. It turns out you like that in there are two people in the world that invented hypertext. Hypertext is like the links that you click on online. And when you click online, you go from like, here's this word, it opens up this whole portal of new words, right? Okay. You can structure text that way. You can take a text, then you can write around the corners of the text to link to the words, right? And that creates layers of text and layers of thinking. You've words that click to those, right? So it's like you click out, click out, click out. There are two people who've come up with that scheme, Jews and Indians, Jews and Hindus. They invented hypertext. So this idea of hierarchical thinking and shared reason, like our peoples have much in common here. The need for conversation and debate, right? As a foundation, and especially practice of law and practice of philosophy and thinking. These are deeply embedded cultural values, but they won't survive unless we fight for them. So as a neuroscientist, like I got into this work, studying these hatreds, I'm really out of necessity. And my preference would be to have continued my studies in psychology and neuroscience to understand how the brain learns. I mean, that's really what I was setting out to do. And around 2016, 2017, when we started the organization, I was seeing people that I knew to be very intelligent falling into these identity politics in ways that were shocking to me. Because these are people I knew were smart. So if these people are falling in for it, this is going to be big. People are going to be checking their brains at the door here, right? And so we knew that was coming. We started the Network Attention Research Institute to be able to better understand and track bad ideas and how they replicate mindlessly, right? We did this to address a plurality of threats. We used AI to do that, and we created a training mechanism. I trained the next generation of analysts that join the CIA or FBI at Rutgers University. We have programs to help them better perceive these kinds of threats. So when I finally did meet Rajiv, it was like, here's a computer scientist who is obsessed and one of the early innovators in artificial intelligence, who cares profoundly about extremism and understands how to reason in a profound and unusual way, right? I felt like I was talking to a kindred spirit, right? Really, it took us very little time to get down to brass tacks and to talk about our opinions about consciousness, the importance of consciousness. We'd both rather be doing that, you know? And so I really found in Rajiv, like, somebody who was both like a mentor and a kindred spirit. I mean, this is somebody who's very senior in their career, obviously. But well, for I thought that was kind of like, somebody who saw the world in unusual ways and didn't have many people to talk to about these things. He's been that way for 30 years. So, so it was really an amazing experience to be able to talk to somebody who could see the writing on the wall that deeply. Push the buck. Push the envelope as hard as you can right now. If people object to it and say you're annoying, push past them. Keep pushing on people. Break this problem. Of all the people I've spoken to, no one knows the grip that and paralysis that is pulling back on the potential in the Hindu world better than you do. No one knows that better than Rajiv does. Make yourself as annoying as possible right now. Push beyond what people think they can handle because they need to wake up. And you are the person that's pushing hardest to make them do that.